All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Actsafe Injury Prevention Week's presentation of financial stress and impacts on mood, understanding our emotions around money and learning to effectively communicate about money in our families. My name is Lisa Wild, and I will be your moderator for this session. For many Canadians, money worries pose more stress than work, personal health, or relationships. Almost half, 48%, of Canadians say they've lost sleep because of financial stress, and 44% say it would be difficult to meet their financial obligations if their pay is late. We are living in a fast-paced world, managing stressful jobs to be able to pay for all of our expenses and live the lives we want to live. This type of sustained stress can have negative impacts on our mood, impacting our work and home lives. However, money is a taboo topic that many of us don't know how to talk about, even with our partners and families. In this session, you will understand your emotions around money and gain useful skills and strategies for effectively communicating about money. I'd like to welcome back Dr. Jyoti Samra. Dr. Jyoti Samra is a national thought leader on issues relating to psychological health, wellness, and resilience, and a highly regarded expert in psychological health and safety, PH&S. Over the past 2 decades, she has been involved in numerous national initiatives that have contributed to policy change in Canada and is a founding and ongoing member of the CSA Technical Committee that developed the National Standard of Canada for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. Thank you again for yesterday's session, and welcome back, Dr. Samra.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that introduction. And hello, everybody. I just see some photos of some folks, but hopefully at the end of the session, you're willing to come on camera. It's always a little fun to be able to see other faces. And I commend you for making time to attend this session on something that, I wish everybody would learn about finances. And so I am going to, throughout the session, pose some reflective questions for you. One of the best ways to kind of maximize the benefit of this session is if you actually kind of take some time to reflect on a few things. If you're so inclined, to pick up a piece of paper and preferably paper rather than your device. But if your device is all you have, you can do it on a notes file, just writing any notes that come to mind for you. And we will be following up with a toolkit of some resources that we're actually putting together for your team. And so you'll get a follow-up that will be a link to this recording, as well as some things that will echo some of the things that I'm speaking about today, and some worksheets and pieces that would be helpful. I'm going to pose reflective questions. Feel free to put in questions or thoughts or comments as they're coming to mind in the chat function. But what we'll do is formally take questions and answers at the end. And if you could please also just hit the top right-hand corner of your Zoom box, hit the 3 dots, and rename yourself, and please include your preferred pronouns. That would be wonderful. So I'm going to share my screen, and before we formally get started, I will make sure that all on the tech end is working. There's my slide, one moment. And I will ask if everybody could also mute themselves if you're not already muted. And may I have I can't see a thumbs up unless someone comes on camera, or an audio quick, maybe Lisa letting me know that you see the slide only and then you see me.
Will do.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to so you can see me and you can see my first slide.
Sorry, at this moment, yes, I can see both your slide and you at the top of my
no
Zoom
top
chat.
banner or anything on the screen?
Correct.
Wonderful, great. Well, welcome to today's session on financial stress and impacts on mood. Understanding our emotions around money and learning to effectively communicate about money in our families. I'm Dr. Jody Samra. I'm a Vancouver-based clinical psychologist, and I have two businesses. So one is a clinical practice group where we offer now fully virtual therapy throughout BC, and then also a workplace consulting company. And as a fun factoid, I do a lot of media work, and one of the most interesting experiences that I've had as a psychologist was hosting a financial reality show called $1 Million Neighborhood on the Oprah Winfrey Network. And it was a really important show in terms of the themes that we addressed around psychology and money. And I remember many people kind of back then would say, oh, well, you know, you're not a financial advisor, you're a psychologist. You know, why are you co-hosting this financial reality show? And when we think about finances, and when we think about kind of all the things that finances evoke for us, the math part is certainly one piece of it, but that's a very small piece. You know, kind of the basics of math, all of us are able to do. The biggest, most impactful and hardest pieces when we think about finances relate to all of the psychology and emotions around that. So I commend you for making time to learn about your relationship with money and hopefully get some good nuggets that you can walk away with in terms of next actionable steps. The psychology of money and finances is something that I'll be speaking about. Understanding the range of different impacts that money and finances and thinking about money and talking about money can have on our emotional states. I'll be talking about some ways that we can effectively communicate about money in our families and with our partners, and how we can approach financial discussions in a way that's effective and doesn't evoke a whole huge amount of anxiety or stress. And then I'm going to talk about financial goal setting and some things that we can consider when we're thinking about how to make changes in our kind of financial health. And then finally, if you are so inclined, I will invite you to consider some areas of homework and some action steps that you can take. Now, finances and sex are consistently two topics that many people, and I would venture to say most people, have difficulty talking about effectively. Interestingly enough, they're topics that are both very taboo in our more public kind of society. You know, it's not usually kind of cocktail conversation to bring up what we have in our bank account or the bills that we owe. And certainly sharing details of our intimate sexual lives is usually something that we're not widely speaking about. Now, what we also know is the challenges that we have, or the taboo feelings that we have around finances and sex, are also ones that carry through to our most intimate relationships. And as a clinical psychologist, my goodness, I've seen many couples over the years that you know, share a life together. They've maybe been together 20, 30, 40 years, have kids, have a house, have dreams, their life together, yet cannot effectively speak about money. And so I invite you to think about the pieces that are most difficult for you, and what your emotional relationship with money looks like. Consider what your relationship with money represents to you and what money represents to you. Consider where that has its origins. You know, consider, you know, right now when the word money is said, what do you think? What associations do you have? Positive, negative, other, neutral? Think about what your thoughts are about how we should communicate about money. Think about who you talk about money with, and who you share information with. And think about how that's maybe changed over the years. Consider the factors that have impacted that for you, and consider what impacts other relationships, whether they were your family of origin and parents and how they talked about money, or a past relationship or a current relationship. Think about how others' emotions around money and their comfort with money impacts how you approach thinking about and feeling about money. Our families of origin, so the families that we were raised in throughout our most formative developmental years, have huge impacts on a lot of things. And one of those things is how we think about money. And so in our homes, in our households, is often the first time that we're getting any understanding of money and what it represents and how we get it, if we have enough or not too much. It can be related to a whole host of emotions. And so if we think of, for example, growing up consistently with less than others, less than peer groups, less than friends. There can be emotions around shame or secrecy or discomfort that can come up for us. Think about how your primary caregivers, so either biological, adoptive, foster parents, or primary people in your life when you were a little one, think about how they talked about money. What were the emotional associations and what were the things that you learned about how to think about money from that family of origin? Consider your needs and values. And so we know all of us, and there's some commonality in the basic necessities of life that money serves, right? Food and shelter, all of the necessities that make us be able to kind of live a life. And so we know that there's a basic level of income or finances that we require just to meet our basic needs. And we know being in an urban setting, a larger setting, a setting that is very expensive to be living in, or a city poses a whole host of demands on top of those basic necessities. And we know that having enough to be able to cover those basic necessities is a critical part of our not only emotional health, but our physical health. So we're emotionally and physically healthy when our basic needs are met. Now, in addition to our basic needs, we all have variety in terms of the kinds of wants that we have, the things that we want to add to our life. And much of that comes from values. And so things that are important to us, if travel is important and you want to save money to expose your children to travel, if you value a particular athletic sport or hobby, right? There's going to be all kinds of things that we value, that matter to us, that bring us meaning and purpose in our life. There's going to be a whole host of individual considerations that impact that. And that's important because that helps us, if we have the means to be able to engage in things that are important to us, that adds to our emotional health and our physical health. So consider what those basic necessities are for you. Those can vary depending on our individual and personal circumstances, and consider the values that are most important for you. So when you think of what money is there for in your life, what are the top 3 or 5 things that come to mind when you think about what money is for? There's a symbolic value that comes along with money. And so, for example, financial independence can represent freedom, right? It can give us autonomy. If we consider factors that, for example, keep some individuals in relationships, particularly when kids are involved, often there's this feeling of money being a predominant factor. And, I've said this for most of my 20 years as a practicing psychologist, that irrespective of what brings people into the therapy room, that at the heart, it's relational issues that keep people in the room. And we know that finances matter when we think about our core relationships. And so we know, unfortunately, that just as many relationships are going to end as those that stay together. And we know that finances and sex, 2 closely related yet distinct topics, are often at the core root for many, many couples. And that decisions around things like leaving an abusive relationship can be really impacted by things like freedom. And so think about metaphorically what money symbolically represents to you, what it matters, what it serves you toward. think about the thoughts and misperceptions that you may have about money, right? So probably all of us can think about some conversation that we've had, or multiple conversations in our families or partners or friends about, what would I do if I won the lottery, dot, dot, dot. And then we fill in the blanks, and there can often be these thoughts that problems would just go away, right? If I just won the lottery. And I think of the number of times in a therapy room I've heard somebody say some variant of that, right? This idea that somehow that would be this kind of panacea solution to things in life. And certainly, again, we know if we look at the science and the literature, we need a certain amount of household income to meet those basic needs. But what we also know is once we get above basic needs, that higher income has zero correlation with happiness, zero correlation. There are some very fascinating statistics that look at two different groups of individuals. So one, individuals that become paraplegic after an accident, a physical injury that many people would say, my goodness, I could never imagine that happening, or I'm sorry, quadriplegic. So my goodness, I could never imagine that happening. I'm not sure if I would want to live, right? A very common sentiment, and researchers have looked at this. And similarly, researchers have looked at groups that have won the lottery. And what we know about happiness is in both of those scenarios that the thing itself, the injury or the winning of the lottery, has virtually no correlation with levels of happiness. And so we know that within a period of 2 years, that happiness and quality of life ratings revert to what they were prior to the physical injury or prior to the lottery win. And fascinating, right? When we think about two things that we would imagine could or would dramatically change our lives. And so consider some of those assumptions or perceptions or misperceptions that you may have about money. When we think about the psychology of money and finances, one of the most consistent behavioral patterns that we see is avoidance. So the land of denial is where we go to when we are faced with things that make us uncomfortable. And in fact, we know that denial is a very well-established psychological defense. It's something that we do in a whole host of situations when we are faced with things that are uncomfortable or feel out of our control or that we have negative associations with. And our behavioral urge when we're faced with discomfort is to make that feeling go away. And out of sight, out of mind can do a good job of that very temporarily. And so consider any avoidance behaviors that you engage in. So not doing the taxes, a very common one, the paperwork and bills piling up, not looking at paperwork or finances when they come in, not sitting down and doing that budget with your partner, right? All of these things that we avoid because we feel like, oh, it's not going to feel so great to do. And so then we just think, I'm not going to do it. Now, what happens over time is that avoidance gets reinforced and it becomes a behavioral pattern that we do more of because it makes us feel better in the short term. But of course, we would know that in the long term, that does nothing to solve issues other than sweep them under the carpet. And of course, if we sweep things under the carpet enough times and for long enough, we're going to eventually trip over that mound that we've created. Over time, we get conditioned emotional association. So if, deleting or filing away the email that comes in on an overdue credit card, or not opening the envelope from the bank and letting it pile up, that over time, what starts to happen is we get all of these emotions. So positive emotions from avoiding or not thinking about something or not looking at it, that gets reinforced. And then when we are faced with it, what often happens is it's so overwhelming, right? If we've let things pile up and not address them and saved all of our big festering, financial concerns with our partner over time, and if we save all those things up, what happens is we generally don't feel as great. And we're going to have more intensity in that negative emotion. And then what starts to happen is enough things go hand in hand, enough instances of time that one evokes the other. And so this is why if we've had negative patterns, negative experiences, negative associations, either in our family of origin or past relationships, what starts to happen is we then think, okay, I have this, just thinking about money will evoke that negative emotional state. And then again, that just further reinforces that avoidance pattern. So consider all of your conditioned associations to money. Think about what those emotions are. Think about how you feel when you avoid something. Think about what you avoid. Think about what you feel or think or anticipate when you're hearing about money or talking about money or thinking about money. Think about your thoughts about money. So we don't think a lot about our thinking, but one of the most important things we can do to manage stress, irrespective of the cause of that, is become very thoughtful about thinking about thinking. And when we think about our thinking, we can start to articulate thoughts or assumptions or things that are kind of simmering in the background that we might not have been otherwise aware of. We have tens of thousands of thoughts a day as human beings. And most of those we're not aware of on, an acute awareness level, but they kind of fester in the background and they impact how we feel. And so when we're experiencing stress and when it's around a particular topic, one of the best things to do is think, let me think about what thoughts are happening there. And that allows us to ever so slightly revise and refine those thoughts. And then think about your behaviors around money, how you approach it, how you feel physically, what your actions are, what you do, what you don't do. And think about opportunities for slight changes. So areas where you think, maybe I'm not approaching that as well as I could or as well as I should. Just kind of make a little note about an area for you that may be an important area to work on targeting a little bit more directly and slightly differently than you are now. Now, when we think about financial stress, many issues. At the top of the list is sleep. So a very significant portion of the population, half of people will say that they've lost sleep over money on repeat occasions. We know about a third of Canadians will report being chronically stressed due to finances. We get anxiety around it. It can create conflict in our primary relationships. It cuts into our leisure time and our hobby time. It can impact that. And overall, our levels of stress and quality of life can be very significantly impacted. Financial literacy is a phrase that refers to how literate or kind of educated and informed we are about finances. And there's a very common perception that, we have to be financial whizzes to be able to understand finances. And that is simply not true. I mean, the level of math that we need to understand is elementary school age. If we think of the core basics that all of us need to know, it's not as intensive as we think it may be. And there's lots of tools that can help us increase our awareness. And many times, I can't think of the number of times I've had people say, I'm not good at math. And that's the statement that comes out when, we may be talking about, discover with money or why there's not a budget or other issues that are coming up with finances. And so we get these associations, and many people have a negative association with, grade school and high school math. And then that gets in the way and we think, I need to know this way more than we actually do to be able to do something about it. And especially when we get to things like interest rates and mortgages and, all these fun things that, have charges and calculations that may feel overwhelming. Again, our urge is to avoid. One of the best things that we can do is actually do the opposite of that. So engage in the opposite action to that avoidance urge, which is to make a commitment to take some time. And I promise a few hours of dedicated attention is about all someone needs to be able to start to enhance their financial literacy, but to understand, kind of basic skills, spend some time thinking about a budget, spend some time thinking about needs and wants, put pen to paper, do a bit of a scan and an audit of what spending behaviors are, and start there. And this helps us get self-sufficient over time and build stability financially. And that has a very positive ripple effect on our psychological health. The more financially literate we are, that is directly correlated with improved psychological health. And so the more knowledge and awareness and education we get, the better we start to feel psychologically. So very important relationship to keep in mind. Our relationships, and in particular, our relationships with partners, are perhaps the relationships that are most impacted. Many couples will experience stress in their relationship that is directly the result of finances. And we're not very good about talking about money in our relationships. And what happens when you think about two individuals that are coming together and developing joint goals and dreams and plans, you have two histories of relationships with money. And so not only is it important for us to understand our own relationship and association with money when we're trying to enhance our literacy and reduce our financial stress, but it is equally important to ensure that if we're in a partnership, that we are understanding what that history is for the other person. And if we have two different styles, if we have two different backgrounds, if we have two different symbolic associations that come along with money, that can often lead to conflict. The more that we can strive for understanding what is the kind of good, bad, and ugly relationships that we and our partners have with money, the better and more effective we can get about communicating about money. Often in relationships, there tends to be kind of by default one person that takes care of finances, right? In a situation where there's a shared financial arrangement. And the common situation is that's one person's responsibility, and usually it ends up defaulting to the person that either likes it the best or is the best at it. And so consider, if you are in a relationship, what that kind of breakdown of responsibility is. Consider if that works. Some couples will say it's, I'm happy as a clam, it kind of makes sense. My partner is the one that's more financially astute, they manage it, that works awesome. Others will say, well, I don't know as much. I feel like I'm not as much in the loop. I feel like I wish I knew more, but maybe I'm not as versed as I wish I was, and that might be a reason they're not communicating. Others may feel resentful that it all falls on them, and so that they may be the best at it, but they don't enjoy it, or they're the one that's carrying that burden. And certainly when we have situations where there are significant discrepancies in income, in particular, I would say one partner that isn't earning an income or earning a very low income relative to the other individual, there can be levels of kind of power differential that can either implicitly or explicitly be there, because money can also, symbolically represent, power and control, and if used effectively, that can be no issue, right? We can have people in vastly different financial kind of earning brackets, but still navigate money really, really well if they have good, effective, honest, authentic conversations about it. And then similarly, we can have relationships that get destroyed because people aren't able to navigate that well. So think about what elements there may be of kind of discrepancy in your relationship. Consider how often you find yourself avoiding conversations about money. And so are there things you should talk about, or should review, or should think about, or should sit down and do together, or should plan together, right? It's often those shoulds that we think, we gotta have that thought for a minute. Often there's a little bit of like tension or apprehension about it, and then we avoid. And we think, I'm not gonna do anything about it because it kind of seems easier. And avoidance can get reinforced if conversations don't go well, right? So if we are avoiding a conversation and we're avoiding it because we truly are thinking, oh, this, we don't do a good job, we aren't effective at talking about it, the more that we do that, the more that gets reinforced. So it ends up being this kind of snowball effect. And one of the best things we can do is make sure that we are committing time and dedicated time during times when, you're getting along reasonably well, in your relationship where there isn't other big conflict that's happening, and be able to dedicate some uninterrupted time to have a focused discussion about money. When we think about why it can be hard sometimes to speak about money, assertiveness can come into play, and that can come into play. We can feel less assertive if we feel we don't have enough knowledge or information about money. We can feel less assertive if we feel like we don't have as much power or control because we're bringing less to the table. We can feel assertive if it turns into a conflict every time money gets out. And so all these things that can affect how well we assert ourselves. And assertiveness really is about effectively communicating, and effectively communicating in a way where you're able to verbalize and describe without fear of reprimand what your feelings and thoughts are, and be able to effectively do that even when there's a difference in opinion from somebody else. And so consider whether kind of enhancing some assertiveness skills around finances is something that may be helpful. When we are dedicating time to talking about money, you want to take some good steps. Schedule a time in advance, right? Don't do it out of the blue. Give the other person a bit of a heads up to be able to anticipate a conversation and be prepared for it, right? Throwing a conversation on someone, at 10 at night when the kids just got to bed and there's an early morning wake up isn't going to be the best timing. And so think about scheduling a time. Think of collecting whatever information you need. And as a good start, you just get bank account logins and invoices and bills and statements, and pull together information that can help you be more objective when you're talking about money. Preparing, put pen to paper, write down what things you want to be able to communicate, what key messages you want to be able to communicate, and practice in front of a mirror, say it out loud to yourself. If you have a trusted somebody in your life, again, we don't talk a lot about this, but certainly therapist is someone that you can talk to, or if you have someone that you do trust in your life, practice it, kind of role play it, think about what words you want to be able to use, and practice assertiveness communication skills as you're going through that. Financial goal setting, all of us have hopes and dreams, and we all have things that we want to achieve near term, right? Things we think of over the next month or 2 or 3, or by year's end, or through this birthday year, right? Or through this semester, or whatever time frame we choose. But there's those kind of near term goals, things that we want to achieve and get to. And all of us have our big hopes and dreams for our future life, right? If retirement or semi-retirement is a part of that, what that looks like, what you want to be able to be comfortable and have freedom to be able to do. There's the comforts that you think as you go through different seasons in life, right? What we may want to need when we're 20 is going to be very different from what we want to need if we're 90. And so, our goals evolve over time. And one of the most important things that we can do as individuals and as families and couples is to talk about what those are, what those hopes and dreams are, and try to get a good sense of the shared areas for you that are important to work towards. Because if we're just feeling like we're doing a budget and saving money just for the sake of it, that feels pretty aversive, for all of us, right? There's this feeling, if we think, oh, I'm going to do a budget, most people think it's not a very fun thing to do, right? We don't get excited about sitting down to do budgets. It feels restrictive restrictive, right? If we think, oh, I'm gonna not spend this, or I'm gonna track what I'm spending, that often feels punitive. It can feel like we're punishing ourselves. And so if we're just doing that for the sake of it, well, it's not that exciting for most of us to do. And when something doesn't feel that exciting, we actually don't really work toward it very well. Now, if we're doing that same exact thing, but we're very clear on what our goals are as individuals, as couples, as families, if we think, what is this money for? It's going to be a means for me to achieve what? Articulate that and think about that. And that can actually make financial goal setting fun, believe it or not, is it can feel fun and good, and it can actually feel quite freeing and can feel quite exciting and rewarding over time when you're able to establish goals and be able to stick to those goals. When we think about budgeting, okay, very simply, what we want to do is look at what's coming in and what is going out. Right? It's a very easy formula. It's an easy math problem. We want to collect everything that is an income after taxes and identify everything that is spent. And so we can come up with numbers that make sense. Then what we want to do is we want to consider what our needs are. Okay, those are our non-negotiables, right? We need to pay rent. We need food in the fridge. We need to clothe and shelter ourselves. So there's going to be the basic needs that we have. And beyond that, right, there's other needs and things like, your cell phone bill, right? We would say, well, we need a way to communicate, especially these days. And so, it's not a life or death situation, but it certainly is something that's a core need to be able to, live a functional life. And so identify what all of those are. Of course, we always want to make sure those needs are taken care of first, and then differentiate those from the negotiables, the wants, right? It's stunning when we actually pay attention to money and what's coming in and out and get a good sense of that. We're often surprised at where maybe money goes or how much is going towards something that maybe just actually doesn't even mean that much to us. And so consider what that is. Think about what your negotiables are versus your non-negotiables. Think about, what and why that is something that you need in your life. Think about areas you can make changes. And the best way to do this is to do a little audit. And I usually suggest pick a month. A little bit longer is better, but pick a month and start on whatever day. So you don't have to say, I'm going to wait till the 1st of next month. You can pick, tomorrow's date, and then just add a month to that and just save everything and make an intentional plan to be able to just track everything that is being spent, get all the monthly bills. There's going to be some that are annual bills that you need to pay attention to, but most is going to be monthly or as needed, and just track it. Save everything and then dedicate a few hours to do a little audit and summary of what's coming in or out. And that can be something that most people avoid, but when you do it, it's not that hard to actually do it. And it can give you this kind of freedom actually to feel like, I know where things are and I know what's coming in and out. When we're considering needs, very common, especially when dealing with chronic stressors, when dealing with anxiety, depression, relationship conflict, that money can be put into things that are not those, non-negotiable needs, but other things that give us short-term reward. And so if we think of, kind of that stereotypical portrayal of the housewife that spends all this money shopping, but really it's anger at the partner, right? A very kind of extreme portrayal that we can think of, but not an uncommon one that we can see this dynamic where money can be used in all kinds of ways in relationships, right? A way to get back at somebody. There can be secrecy in relationships around money. And so think about what those elements are from a need end and what other associations spending has. And so we know that things like online shopping, right? Gone are the days where you had to wait for a store to physically open to access something. And now it's very easy to engage in things. So when we think of online, addictions, not quite the most appropriate clinical term, but if I use it very colloquially, shopping addiction, gambling addiction, other kinds of addictions, even online gambling and shopping would be the two main ones that we would see. Is we can see behavioral patterns develop over time, and in particular have a higher likelihood of developing when stress is higher. And the reason is we get little dopamine hits that make us feel good, right? It's the same reason that slot machines and Vegas always wins. Why is that? Why do we get so kind of addicted? There's this intermittent reinforcement schedule that kind of makes us feel good. So we get these pops of dopamine that make us feel really amazing, and we want to do more of that. And so think about what some of those relationships are for you, and then do a very honest review of what your core needs are. When we are establishing financial goals, we want to be very smart in how we set those goals. And so SMART is an acronym that refers to making sure that our goals are very specific, that we can measure them, that they are attainable, that they're relevant, and that they're time-based, right? So if we say, I want to save enough money to never have to work after the age of 55, okay, that's a very general goal. There's nothing in that goal that's going to tell us what we're going to do and how we're going to work toward that, and it's not going to be probably any of these things, right? It certainly isn't specific. Maybe we could measure it, I guess, to see over time, but we don't really have a good objective index of that. And overall, it's just not a really realistic goal. We're probably going to fail. Now, if we were to say every single paycheck, I'm going to make sure I take $100 and I put it in this specific account where I'm charged to do a withdrawal, and I'm going to consider that as being fully out of my budget, for how I'm allocating what money I have left over at the end of the month, and I'm going to do that for 3 months. Right? There's something that we can measure, it's specific, there's an attainability, and we can evaluate over time how well we're doing. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're establishing financial goals, either as individuals or as families, is they're far too lofty and not at all realistic. And so what we want to do is set ourselves up for success. And if we are establishing SMART goals, that can really enhance the likelihood that we are successful, and that gets intrinsically rewarding. It makes us want to do more of that, which is really great. Reflect on your financial needs, what the non-negotiables are, what those wants are, how they differ. Take some time to really kind of just think about this and come back to it. Sometimes it can be helpful to make kind of a master list of all the needs and wants you have, and then come back to it and think, okay, let me reevaluate what really is a need, what's a want. Sometimes we can flip things back and forth from different lists. And think about one specific actionable step that you are willing to take and commit to. Money is a tool. If used properly, it makes something beautiful. It gives us means to a whole bunch of important ends, and used wrong, it can make a mess. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your time and attention. We are very social media connected, so feel free to follow us. We would be happy to send you a financial toolkit if you take some time to either try it or QR scan form. We just started to use it this week, and so please be patient if it doesn't work. And there's a link here that I'll put in the chat just momentarily. So we'll stop the formal part of the presentation. I'll stop the share. Would love if people want to come on camera, and then we have 15 minutes on the dot for questions and answers.
Yes, fantastic. So
I'm going to, before I forget, make sure I just put that jot form link in the chat. Okay, over to you, Lisa.
yes, so we've had a few questions come in. We'll start with the first one. It links with another question here, actually. We've got Are there any books or other materials related to financial health and emotional impact that you might recommend?
Yeah, great question. So one is we will put some we're putting some resources together for your group specifically in the toolkit. So I just put this a link in the chat if you want to sign up for that. We possibly will have it ready for tomorrow, but certainly by next week. So that'd be one thing. I'd say, oh geez, what's that book? It's slipping my mind. They're not psychology books, but there's Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one. There's, what's that other famous one? Just give me a moment, it'll come to mind. There's not one that I would say here's the best, but there's a few of these that are very mainstream financial ones that actually do a pretty good job, all things considering. Something smart, Rich. I'm going to have to Google it. My apologies. So I will find this for you. And I will do it as we're kind of multitasking to come up with the answer. Aiden, if you are still on the call, no, he's gone. So, oh no, Aiden, you're on the call. Do you mind popping onto our website and seeing under the book section? I think I probably have those financial books listed there. If you don't mind looking for those, that'd be fantastic.
Awesome. While he's doing that, I will go on to the next question. Yeah. So we've got, how would you approach talking to your partner who has a very different view about how to spend the household budget, especially when they're the ones that earn the money? It says, I am a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah. So very, it can be a very challenging situation. So there's a few things. One is for yourself. What I want to do is get very clear on, just very precisely the key messages that are important to you. And like media messaging, we can get very specific on making kind of no more than kind of 1 to 3. That's a great place to start. Think about your why. Right? Think about really being able to articulate what your why is of why you want something to be different. And my guess is going to be that there's going to be, some significant element that's tied. It's tied to values. It's going to be tied to dreams and plans and things that are important there. And then have a discussion, right? And set a time. And this is where it's hard when the person is closed. I think, what you want to consider is what are the factors that make your partner not open to it? Is it power and control? Is it representing something in some way that maybe you don't understand? Does it feel like a limit or a restriction? Is it that every time the conversation came up, there was a fight? So just like no one's managing it well. And I think I believe when we truly can really appeal to our partner in a very authentic way, right? To be able to express both how upsetting something is, right? When we can really convey, this is really hard for me. I feel like I have no power and control. I feel like I can't even talk to you about this. And I know you make more, makes me feel really vulnerable. We really need to be able to talk about this effectively and come to some solution that works for us as a couple. Then I think it's no different than any other couple issue that we have, is we try and understand, why is our partner not open to it? What are ways that we can help them? And for many people, this is such a big topic that we see in therapy. And if your partner is open, sometimes a couples therapist can be really great. Like, it's something in our practice, we work a lot with individuals. Sometimes the partner's not coming in at all. And maybe you're just speaking to someone that can help about that, or trying to just say, can we at least go see somebody once to be able to talk about this effectively?
Awesome. Yeah, the other question that kind of connected to that one, let me just scroll here for a second. Are there any budgeting platforms or apps that you would recommend?
Yeah, I don't have one front of mind, but what I wanted to do was pull some together for you in our resource kit that we'll put together. So there isn't one this minute. What I say is, don't make it hard, is just start, get an Excel spreadsheet or get a notes file on your phone and just write down things. That's a fine place to start. But we'll have, one of the things in our toolkit is going to be a budgeting tracking sheet that will outline some main categories that you can track in. So that will be one thing that you'll get. And then what we will also do is look at some good apps that are free. I always want to make sure the ones that have good confidentiality and, some of the privacy, especially these days, is we want to be mindful. So we will vet a few, and those will be in the toolkit. So just make sure you like there's a few little quick evaluation course questions that we've got, and then you can sign up for our newsletter and we'll send you that.
Awesome. All right, do you see an increase in lottery buying as an effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, as people are hoping to get money from any avenue? And is that an addiction too?
Yeah, it's interesting. One is, it would fall in that category, right? We think of, I mean, certainly there have been increases that we're seeing in things like online shopping and gambling, right? Those two things. And it is that really that dopamine kick, right? And people are bored, there's more screen time, and feeling more stress collectively. So we know depression rates, anxiety rates, and alcohol use is all up. And so absolutely. And interestingly enough, I don't recall the stats specifically, but I feel like I recently heard, and I don't remember the jurisdiction if it was here, but exactly that about lottery, more people buying lottery tickets because they're hoping, again, the panacea solution, right? That we think I win the lottery and all my problems go away. Well, your financial problems go away, none of your other problems go away, right? And so, yeah, it's interesting, right? As human beings, we hope and wish and have these ideas and perceptions, but the science tells us that actually isn't going to solve it.
So we have another one. With so many people having lost income, how can we maintain our self-confidence or self-worth when planning for a bleak financial future?
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer to that. One of the many things that's most heartbreaking about COVID is just so many impacts on livelihood, right? And so I mean, I'm a psychologist, so we see lots of stories, but I'm also just a human being and a small business owner, and I have friends that have been laid off and all kinds of circumstances, and I feel like it really is a survival end, right? We have basic needs that we need to be able to not worry about whether we can pay rent next month or get groceries. And it's one of the most heartbreaking ramifications that I believe we're seeing and will continue to see through COVID. I think one of the things to keep in mind, two things, right? When we're in the midst of, as we are, a pandemic and a global crisis, it just feels like it will always be this way. And to remind ourselves, like every drop of everything we know and history, most importantly, tells us it won't, that it's going to be a hard, probably couple of years, and things will start to level over time. One of the trends that I found very interesting that has looked at, again, obviously nothing identical to COVID, but similar kind of, areas when there's been pandemics or crises and things that have happened, is rates of education go up, actually. And so one of the things is it becomes opportunities for us to maybe think about values and goals and things that maybe we had dreams about that we haven't done, and think, can I expand this in some other way? I think to keep in mind that there's such a shared experience for so many people now, and not that takes our individual pain away, but I do wish and hope, and I think I do believe that we are connecting in better ways every which way, in our work environments, with our relationships. And I think when we can share this load, we talk about it, because you're not alone, and it helps things not feel so bleak. If we feel like, okay, we're kind of a bunch of us are in this situation, we're going to try to get through it. And it's about keeping hope during what is a temporary extended time, but also knowing this won't be like at some future point. I keep saying, all of us one day are going to be, on our proverbial, kind of in the seniors home. I like to say that the seniors home stories that we're going to look back, and none of us are ever going to forget 2020, right? Ever. And so if we can get that perspective, that can help us kind of day to day.
Do you think COVID-19 will change the way we have been spending? And also, how do you think the next generation can learn from this, especially now that they have seen how challenges like these affect families?
Oh, great question. And yeah, something I've been thinking about so much. We do, the stats are telling us people are spending less. And one is we have less, but collectively, actually, the things that we're doing, and so many people, right, myself included, but certainly if we look broadly, I think so many of us, every single one of us can relate to the idea of, oh, I'm saving a bit of money on whatever the thing is that we were, right? And obviously, like, things outside our home are the big one. And I think that's really important. And I think if we look at some of the, the trends and memes and all these things, I mean, my goodness, all of us, myself included, gardening, I've never thought in my life I'd be gardening. And here I am knowing how to grow things, a miracle. I didn't even know I could. Cooking and baking and even tried bread. And I think a year ago, I would have thought, there's no way I have time in life. Now, all of that being said, I think all of us can relate. Making bread and sourdough in particular, which I've not attempted, by the way, but making bread, gardening, growing your own food, and I think more extended as we're seeing impacts on global supply chain. We are way more aware, I think, collectively about a whole bunch of things about how we live. I hope and pray that we all take lessons out of this. I think it is going to be such lessons lost if we don't pay attention to that. And I absolutely believe that kids that are experiencing this, especially those that are that are going to remember it. If you think kind of 8, 9, 10 and above, right? This is going to be imprinted in their memory, that I absolutely hope and that this is going to change behaviors in good ways. And I think environment, now I'm a self-disclosed hippie vegan. And so, I think environment and consumption and where we consume, I've been actually really excited it's another part of my life that's really important to me, and the environmental considerations that so many are having. So yeah, I do believe things are going to change.
I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up
this
and quickly, webinar.
The notes are, and so Aiden posted the notes. Oh, sorry, they went privately, but on the book. Okay. Yes, Aiden, thank you. So let me send it to everybody quickly. So you've got resources, and we will make sure, Aiden will put it in our corporate follow-up as well. So sorry, I had a total brain blip. So Start Late, Finish Rich. The Total Money Makeover is the one, and then The Wealthy Barber. That's the one that's, kind of very like famous and classic. It actually is really good. It's really practical. It's real. I've read it all, and it's very practical and kind of easy to understand. So that would actually be the one that I'd start with, is The Wealthy Barber.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Samra, for joining us again and for another fantastic session. Our time is coming to a close. If you want to learn about this subject a bit more, please visit our website, actsafe.ca, and we'll have additional resources as well as links to all of the APE Week presenters' websites. One of the best ways of dealing with mental health awareness is by showing support to everyone working to make a difference. So we hope to see you guys tomorrow as well. And on behalf of Dr. Samra and Actsafe Safety Association, I want to thank you for joining us today and for supporting our annual Safety Week initiative. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you.